Yeah, we made a raft just from things that we had found in the garage. And I wanted to show them. Have you ever seen that long black and white documentary called Kon-Tiki?
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to show them that tonight, I think.
And
So
are you
yeah,
gonna?
no, there's a lot to be done, and I wouldn't necessarily like again call it fruitful, but because we're also just sort of staving off a lot of fear and a lot of worrying and sort of grieving and sort of reading too much news and it's really interesting. I mean, I'm really I think less so this week, but initially I was really hoping for some sort of silver lining about what might be revealed about sociality and relationality, and I'm kind of interested in what can happen virtually over these Zoom meetings or Skype meetings, what's possible socially or through the screen, through the computer, stuff that I was really skeptical about. And so I'm hoping something's revealed there, and I'm hoping something's revealed about what doesn't get delivered through the screen as well. And maybe I'll be a little clearer about that via this grand experiment. Just other stuff too about using less and maybe being less acquisitive, other stuff relative to the economy and climate change. There's a lot to say, yeah. It's kind of fascinating because I was really, I get really nervous. I get really nervous socially, and I get really nervous with upcoming events. So I was really, in some sense, not looking forward to that and all the travel. So initially, when it was canceled, I was kind of happy. But I think that those kinds of social events and that kind of sharing can be really festive and this kind of like hinge piece as an artist or a writer sort of goes out to present the work. I mean, I make art and I write. I think it's all very social. They're all kind of messages out to the world. So if they don't hit or they don't land or there's no conversation that ensues, it's very difficult. It can be very, like very much like creating into an echo chamber, and that's no fun. So, I'm in the office, and I don't write in the office. I write in the kitchen, but the kitchen's being used right now, so I thought I'd bring you in here. This is a painting by Gabby Rosenberg, and up here, this one is by Andres Machin, and they're both friends of mine. I love these paintings. And what else?
Well, why do you love the paintings? I mean, they look awesome. But what's your particular connection to them, or the people who created them?
Well, you can't really see that, but here, this one. Here. It's kind of like someone tapping someone else on the shoulder. There's like a profile here and a profile here, and it just looks like someone's excited to be talking to someone else, There's just something funny and cartoony about it, and something, like I'm saying, kind of social, and there's a sort of pathos that I really like about it. This one is a kind of, initially it kind of looks like a back to basics modernist piece, but when you get closer, it's hard to see from here, but when you get closer to it, it starts to become a room with a lot of weird walls, and it almost looks like one of those weird art galleries. It just does a lot of different stuff with perspective, and also the colors each have a little gray in them, and they're sort of muted, but still really, there's a lot of saturation, even though they're also muted, and I could stare at it for a long time.
And I know you have some bones and stones. Yeah. What do you got?
This is apparently this is supposed to be a whale ear bone, and I got it at a rock shop. All right, okay, so this is a woolly mammoth tooth.
Oh, nice.
That's like the top molar where Wooly was eating grass, I guess. And then that's like some worn down root. I think this would be long if it were the whole root.
Yeah.
Well, I tell this story in the book, and it's the excerpt I'm going to read actually for you. But I had never bought anything on eBay, and I went out to eBay and started looking at rocks. And then I started looking at meteorites, and I started to see these iron meteorites, and they just looked so beautiful to me. But it was actually just astonishing how much stuff you could get, and just to have as like a common human being. I think I thought it was all at museums, or it should all be at museums. I didn't really realize there was this whole collector thing, and it's super fascinating.
Yeah. So if you want to show us the meteorite, you can slide into. Yeah. Look at that.
This is really heavy. It's hard to see, but it's got this. I gotta stand up. It's got like a weird fold in it, which I write about. See that right there? And then the whole thing, it must weigh 35 pounds or something. It's actually really hard to hold up.
It's sort of heart-shaped.
Yeah. It's got this weird shape to it. And yeah, that's it, man.
That's awesome. That's great. Awesome? Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's interesting writing a book, having come from the art world. And then before I was in the art world, I actually made a feature film. And so I've sort of been going in and out of needing to heed conventions in order that a thing be legible to an industry or a distributor. So of course in feature filmmaking, and especially then in say 1999 or 2000, there was no internet where you were going to suddenly release your film yourself on some YouTube channel or anything. There was just nothing like that still. It was just like maybe at the inkling of that. So there was still a way that we needed to with that movie. And I was interested in sort of teaching myself the conventions of what made a movie feel like a movie, and sort of messing with conventions and sort of interrupting them. So I have always been interested in wielding sort of, I guess, coherence or legibility. I kind of wield that, and I gift it, and I feel like that part is very social, but there's so much else that I'm interested in, and I'm really interested in poetics, and I'm interested in odd, weird, uncertain ways of communicating that are very specific. I still think of them as specific. I don't think of them as approximate. When I say poetics, I mean something so specific that it's still in motion. And so I feel like I'm always kind of I'm always kind of orchestrating a few things. With the feature film, that was, you needed to come up with something that felt like a feature film in order to get it distributed. So we sort of did that, and then I didn't like that. And so I ended up going to art school after that, and I thought to myself, I have to like the process of whatever it is I'm doing. I have to enjoy getting up in the morning. I want to be thinking about what I'm interested in, and I need to find a world where someone's going to appreciate the things that are hottest for me and most interesting to me. I don't want to accidentally make a movie that I thought I wasn't interested in making product. Let's put it that way, because you don't know who's going to read it. You don't know who's going to like it. And so you might spend 2 years, 3, 4, 5 years making something that very few people are interested in. And that's okay. But if you didn't like the process of making it and no one likes it, then you're in trouble. In other words, if you're making product that there was no audience for, then you're in trouble. And so for me, I wanted to protect a kind of joyful existence, basically. And so the art world seemed to promise that in some sense. There was a way I thought, if I keep my overhead low, I don't necessarily need to sell anything. That's not what's on my mind. What's on my mind is trying to think my best thoughts, trying to think my most interesting thoughts, trying to follow my vague thoughts into more specific places. And so that's a practice that I sort of am going on a hunch that if I'm good enough at getting my thoughts to be more and more specific and following the hot spots so that they're more and more and more specific, that suddenly things will become deep and interesting, and there'll be things that haven't been seen or said before. So then to bring that practice into book writing, that was easy for me because I've been, in some sense, doing it so long. I protected myself. I kept telling people I'm pretending to write a book. But what I did was all the time I spent in my studio, which is maybe 35 or 40 hours a week, I just switched over to writing. So I was writing a lot. I mean, I took notes for a year while I was making the sculptures, but then at some point, about a year after I started taking notes, I started writing in earnest, I call it. So I wrote a lot every day for about a year before I felt like the book before I had a first draft that was ready for people to look at. And I know, I guess it's a weird book, but I really like weird books. So for me, I wasn't really. Anyway, I don't know what to say. I mean,
well, was it?
I don't really like a book that's too straightforward. I read very few things that are straightforward. So I wasn't thinking that I was writing a memoir. I was thinking that I was making a book. I was thinking literary nonfiction, but I was also kind of thinking creative literature. I was thinking that it didn't necessarily need to be true. I was just making the best book I could make, and trying to use some of the details from my life in order that there was some amplitude in the writing, but it was really a practice of writing that needed fodder more than it was that I needed to tell people anything about my life. I didn't revise toward any genre appropriateness. I would never do.
Yeah. Good.
But just again, because I come from art, and so also I like weird books, so anyway, but it was right away. I think the two editors that I chatted with, both were talking genre immediately, and I don't. I mean, because then I was still saying, I don't know, maybe it should be called fiction, or just I said, can we just call it literature? And then I really like the term literary nonfiction, and I think I thought that we could put that on the back of the book, and that there was some place in the bookstore where they put literary nonfiction, and there probably is. I don't prefer the term memoir, but that was what they wanted to do, and I tried to get it taken off the book, and different people just kept saying, "Oh, that's how they know where to put it in the bookstore. Don't worry, you'll be near other books that you like." And so I was like, okay. So I kind of went with that, but I think that the label, or the genre label, comes after you write the book, and if it's a little off, and people respond to that, they're really responding to the person who labeled it more than they're responding to the book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
It's a book about bonding and love, and the sort of three main threads that are sort of moving forward in the book are my father's decline from dementia, and my sort of rekindling a relationship with my birth mother, and the weird coincidences that happened when I met her, and the story of my love for matter. It's sort of like a sculptor's story, but that centers around buying this meteorite and all the different things it seemed to tell me or suggest to me, basically. So there's those three narrative threads, like me being an artist, me trying to figure out what's going on with my birth mother, make sense of that relationship. And then as my dad was dying and declining from dementia, I started researching artificial intelligence And so there's a lot of information about artificial intelligence as well. Art is interesting in the book, and also people. People are not described in the book. There's no very few visual descriptions of people, and there's very few. There's scant discussion of art per se, art objects. So sometimes I'll go to an art show, or I tell you I met this artist or whatever, but I don't tell you a lot about what I thought of the art or what it looked like or anything like that. There's this kind of interesting idea because the book circulates around socializing or sociality and isolation. There's a kind of examination mainly of the sociality of the art event, basically, or the sociality of the studio visit, and what kinds of prizes are provided, by hanging out with people. March 2016. I walked in, back from Houston, greeted the baby and Maggie, and then we, all of us at once, noticed the small box on the front porch. I hauled it into the house and onto our dinner table, held my breath. They watched while I got a knife. There was only the sound of cardboard tearing, and then I retrieved a bowling ball of a thing suffocated in bubble wrap, which appeared to be accompanied by Zot, neither invoice nor receipt, no language. Remarkably heavy, and bandaged like this in a relentless, sad tape job that looked like it had been performed by a mental patient. Maggie backed away, suddenly nervous, pulled Iggy aside by the back of his shirt. I looked at them, and back at the thing, unwrapped it while they watched. There it was, an iron glob of gum. It was buzzing, it was glowing, just smaller than a human head, but much heavier. Unbelievably heavy for its size, like it had a different type of gravity that applied to it. An alien gravity might have applied. It was dark gray, but metallic too, and had dips, and had deep pits lined in black. Gooey, tortuous crevices, folds which were also penetrated by black and burnished in zigs and snoods, coruscant at its facets or scallops, its outermost convexities, which could have been observed at this point to have been no less vulnerable for being lustrous. It was a turtle from the event horizon, a doghead from Jupiter. All the weight gave two simultaneous and opposite impressions. The impression that it would like to have squirmed away, dropped away maybe, barreled right through the earth and on and into the empty blue-black of space, and a kind of stalwart, noble servitude unstained by fear. I'm here telling you, it was saying hello. Do you think it's radioactive? Are you sure about this rock? Maggie refused to touch it, pulled Iggy out of the room before relenting just a moment later. We all touched it at once, gingerly, guilelessly. We stared. It was beautiful, in the most banal and obvious sense of the word. I mean, plainly and strongly seductive, erotic. It did occur to me that it might spy on us or resubstantiate like a compressed foam Jesus into some sort of elephantine cuttlefish overlord, so I didn't know where to keep it overnight. Maggie was astonished. How do you know it's real? She asked several times. I showed her a small card I'd finally uncovered, swaddled beneath the meteorite. Here's an info card. He said he would send a certificate of authenticity, but I don't see anything here. So Maggie reads the card. She says, found 1527, Argentina. Yeah, looks like the colonizing Spaniards came upon a group of people who showed them this field, Campo del Cielo, in 1527. So these rocks fell while humans watched. I treated the meteorite as I would any guest, and laid it gently down on a small red wool coaster, and then got under my own covers to sleep. I dreamed that for the rest of my life I would reinvest all of the money that came in from selling artwork to purchase more and more pieces of this particular meteorite, the Campo del Cielo. I would spend my life reuniting the fragments, and slowly I would become famous, an artist known for this obsession. And when they were all back together, all of the pieces in one room, there would be a Terminator-like rise of the machines via this metallic reunification, a big bang in reverse, this thing I had caused, this thing I knew to do. I would be an agent of divine material chaos, but it wouldn't be a drag, it would be fate. It would be lovely and epic and right, like the best heroine, but rather than singly ecstatic, encased in ugly nods, it would be ubiquitously, publicly salutary. The stress of the world would gather into a point, and having become too dense to be supported by the web of our collective desire, would whirl into a baby black hole and drop all of the matter of our galaxy through an interstellar poop chute into a teardrop-shaped bag of shit, which would land in some nature canyon somewhere. It, terrestrial intersubjective tension and its more intellectual cousin, torsion, would then start again so meekly that it might be mistaken for the weak force itself, gravity. It would glow, and the magnetic field would start to creep around a new Earth in another part of the still observable universe. We'd all die, but our constituent pieces would become other, much cooler stuff. I woke up horny. In the morning, I decided to take the Meteorite out of the house, but didn't know how to carry it. I chose a large, clean canvas tote and tried not to bonk it around too much as I walked. It was metal, but may as well have been flesh and bone. It was clearly alive to me, an iron creature. On a shelf just above my welder, I let it sit in my studio for 3 days without looking at it again. But then things started to happen. Unbelievable things happened. No, I don't. I don't listen to music while I'm writing. I listen to music otherwise, and I'm always looking for new stuff. I kind of get excited about a song, and then I tire of it really quickly. And so I'm just kind of a roving music fan. Music, I think, functions kind of like smell does, where if you were listening to a song at a certain time and then hear it again, you're sort of time travel back to certain places. I think that's kind of fascinating, and I think music's amazing because it kind of does hit us. It doesn't just hit our ears; it hits our bones, and it sort of enters us from all angles. And so I think it works on us in a kind of really material, bodily, non-language way. And I'm definitely interested in those kinds of experiences and those kinds of knowings and those kinds of responses. I don't think of my writing as related to a non-language space, but I think of a lot of other activities that are, and I find writing and my fingers being on the keyboard is such a fertile interface. It's just full. I don't need anything else there. It's like as long as I'm typing and I'm trying to make sentences, thoughts and images and memories just kind of flood me. And so I definitely have trouble keeping up more than I really need to be reminded of things. I think much more clearly if I'm typing than when I'm just talking to you, like this. My thoughts kind of get fractal, like they get more and more specific, and I'm able to take one thought and realize that there's actually 10 small thoughts that it's made up of, and I like being able to think like that. And so I find that that kind of thinking by writing is definitely joyful. It's very much a bodily pleasure, and it's definitely something that even if this book's done and I'm sort of due to go back into the studio, but I definitely don't want to stop the practice of writing. I really like it, and so I started writing something else. No, in my studio when I'm not trying to make sentences, I think I will listen to music, for sure, and I do like. I do really enjoy. I like all kinds of music, but I like kind of like fuzzed out, really loud metal. Not really metal, but like industrial.
Yeah.
Like there's a great band called The Dead Sea with a C. They're from New Zealand. I like those guys. Boris, Japanese band. Kind of wall of sound stuff. I find really invigorating. No, when I was younger, I was really like DJing my life, DJing the soundtrack of my life. And I really don't do that anymore. I really just sort of like, it's just more like ham-fisted moves with music or podcasts. I would say, having that coffee shop / performance space was, a really, really fun period of my life. Very rich and very abundant with love and laughter. And it was really amazing. It sounds like yours was too. I mean, if young people are listening, I would think that opening some sort of space, whether it's a gallery or a bookshop or some other place where you can have these small events. It can be so fun. And it also teaches you that, you know, especially when you're young, you're making your own, you're sort of world making at that point. You're making your own art world. You're making your own book groups. You're making your own sort of like salon members, you know. And that is a lot more fun to me anyway than trying to climb up into someone else's art world, basically. My time at the Bearded Lady was amazing, and it was especially amazing because in general I won't socialize very much, and so here I had to. It was like my worst fear. I had to basically host people almost every day that I was working. There was I mean to say, I had to host people every day. It was like one long party basically, and it was in my space. So it was good for me to be that social and to be forced to be that social. And something that sort of mirrors that right now that happens in my life is I'm a teacher at California Institute of the Arts, and I'm lucky. I get to teach whatever I want, and I generally will teach theory seminars, weirdly. And so I get to sit with people reading these beautiful, amazing, hard, difficult texts, and we figure them out together. And it's super fun, and it feels like love, like we're doing a loving thing, talking with each other. And it's really important to me. But, anything like that forces me to get out of my house and into the world is really important. And sometimes it does take some sort of conceit for me, because if I don't have a bookshop or a coffee shop that I'm running, and I don't have a class that I'm running, then there's got to be some other way that I trick myself into getting out the door. And, part of that is, this premise that happens in the book where I kind of say to myself that I'm going to do this experiment. Like, do more coincidences happen, if I'm hanging out with people? And is there something important? Like, should I be leaving my studio more often to hang out with people? And for most people, that's an easy question. It's like, duh, yeah, you need people. But for some reason in my mind, I've made this decision that being productive, that making art and making my writing and doing all of that stuff that I feel really joyful doing is somehow enough of a contribution to the world. And why doesn't it make me feel accompanied all the time, And I guess the obvious answer, now that I'm done with the book, is they're different activities. One is socializing, and love is an action word. And even if I want my sculptures to be kind of loving things, and I'm imbuing them with love and care and attention and interest in this feverish encounter, that doesn't all necessarily translate to someone else in the world feeling accompanied by me or loved by me, even though that could be my intention. At the Bearded Lady, we used to have what we called writing group. And so each of us would we'd have a group, we'd meet once a week for 2 or 3 or 4 hours, however long it took, maybe 5 or 6 of us, not too many. And we would each bring a book that we thought was beautiful or lovely or weird or whatever. And one by one, we would just open the book to whatever page and find a sentence, either the first sentence on the page, usually, unless it was awful and didn't feel like it was going to be generative. And we would just have everyone write that sentence down, and then just do free writes where your pencil, doesn't stop moving. We would do a 5-minute or a 10-minute or a 20-minute. And those things were really important to me, just because as a young artist or a young writer, there's a lot of like naysaying that can happen. I think it's really important to be able to get stuff out and to be able to say yes to yourself, say yes, say yes, say yes, and practice what that is, and then start to form it and rewrite and edit and take things out much, much, much later. I think it's important to have a practice where you just sit down, and whether it's with a group or alone, you just figure out ways to be productive and, write for a few hours every day. I would just say, follow the things that are confusing to you and interesting, and sort of try to generate either work or pastimes in which you're dealing with things that you're uncertain about, things that and questions that seem unanswerable, and that those things are always really, really rich. And I think that the more we can sort of hold two things in our head long enough to realize that they don't quite agree, is sort of a it's sort of like there's a correlation to how much we're able to learn. And as the years pass, I think it gets harder and harder to do that. So it's maybe easier for you to do it now when you're young, get into a practice of it, so that you don't get old and cracks.